but even physically. Kwangathi Nkosi xa siphuma kwelaa cala singatsho sithi bekukuhle ukuchitha isabatha kunye nawe endaweni yakhe engcwele. Bless many others abasizawujoyina. Sisonke Nkosi sithi kumnandi ukuba noYesu. Sikelela ke program siyibeke ezandleni zakho ezinguyiswantu. UYesu Kristu esimbonga nguku kusemaphakadeni. Amen.
Thank you so much, Elder Zansi, for leading us with the word of prayer. We have started already our program. So we are having a beautiful weekend. This weekend is a weekend of Family Life Ministries and Adventist Men weekend. So it's a blessed Sabbath. It's another day, another Sabbath. And we are also blessed this weekend as we start this Sabbath. Today we are having Pastor Thula Nkosi with us, the man of experience. So the topic for today says the role of the church and family members within families during and post-lockdown. So I like this topic. It says the role of the church and family members within families during and post-lockdown. So this topic is interesting if you look at it. So I like the preposition that are being used here. It says during and post, which means this COVID-19 came to us as an enemy. It just caught us off guard, because in this topic we don't have pre-lockdown. We only have during and post. There's no pre-lockdown. So which means the topic suggests that the COVID-19 just caught us off guard. So we did not have some preparation before the lockdown. Hence, the topic says the role of the church and family members within families during and post-lockdown. So our elder, or Pastor Thula Nkosi, will lead us through this topic. But before he comes in, so our program will go as follows. So we have already prayed. Then the guest speaker will come in. Then after the guest speaker, the Adventist Men leader, Brother Freddy Rampiesa, will have a word after the guest speaker. And then Elder Masina will have some closing remarks and then announcements. And then closing prayer. Someone will close for us in prayer. So now, without wasting time, I'll take this time to our guest speaker, Pastor Thula Nkosi, to take over the platform. Thank you.
Good evening, friends. I'm glad we're here discussing the family in the context of a crisis, which is not only local, national, it is also international. It needs no saying that we did not expect this. All of us were taken by surprise. And we should not have been taken by surprise, because we have a church that teaches us that there's going to be distress of nations. Trouble is ahead of us. In fact, my view is that this COVID situation is preparatory time for us to stand a worse crisis. In fact, there's going to be a series of this crisis, and they're going to land on each country differently, so that the pattern may not always be the same, so that responses to the crisis may differ. Remember, in God's unintentional will, the devil has been allowed to mess up with things, so that sin may reach its ultimate fruition and itself justify God's punishment over the devil, the angels, and those victims who will be following them. So one of the things that the devil has done, he has focused on the family. As Babu Kun was speaking, I was saying to myself, and I thought about this earlier in the day, that one of the challenges we face as African Christians in the Adventist Church is that we have inherited a system of faith, biblically rooted, but with a model designed in the Euro-West. You see, if I were to start a church, I would center the home and family life as a controlling department of all departments. And it will be linked to stewardship. The pillars of that church will be stewardship and family life. Let me pose my argument. Stewardship is the wholeness of life. It should never have been made a department, which is why we're unfaithful, because we've sectoralized life. We've broken it into little pieces: youth, adults, family life, Sabbath school, and all these things. These things have come from an Euro-Western mind. You see, Westerners are experts at breaking things up, which is why they've been racist. For most of the time, they're related to black people because they have a penchant for analyzing things. African thought synthesizes things. It brings things together. That's why 20 people don't mind sleeping in the same house. For whites, that would be a disaster. They would think about germs, diseases, and all those things. I'm not saying pet 20 people in your house, but all I'm trying to say is there are fundamental epistemologies inside the Adventist Church that we have not taken care of. The reason why blacks are failing in the Adventist Church as a community is that the Adventism has been brought to them on an epistemological plate that does not speak, number one, historically to the Bible, secondly, to their own cultural perspectives. Remember also that the Bible is rooted in an Afro-Asian perspective. Jews were not Europeans. Even now, historically, Jews are fundamentally Euro. Look at the geography that Genesis 1 and 2 go to. The Garden of Eden overlapped into Egypt. The White and Nile River are mentioned there. Euphrates in the Middle East and Tigris, which is why until Jesus left, there were no Europeans in Christianity. All Old Testament Christians or believers were primarily dark-skinned people. That's a topic of another day. Now, but let me make an addition here, which is why biblical cultures, biblical practices have a lot of affinity with historical African cultures. For instance, if you read the 10 Commandments, the African commandments start with commandment number 5. If you want, obeying parents is the first thing, and it ends with goes into the Sabbath and other things. So we have to understand that we are now talking about family life in the context of a Euro-Christian model rather than of a biblical model. We are forcing the Bible into a cultural perspective that is alien to the Bible. I might be saying a very tough statement here, but we need to understand why young people are struggling with certain things we say from the pulpit and from the lecture halls of our churches, of our schools. Because we're bringing their food, their meal from a different dish. We should be cooking Adventist Christianity in Africa from what I would call Otri food, our pots. All right. Family life. If you study family life in the Bible, it is based on the concept of communalism. Family in the African community begins with father and mother, then children, relatives, other persons like your grandparents and so on. In fact, if you study the history of sociology in Africa, the family never dies. We don't have such a concept as a broken family in Africa because the family never breaks. Those who are dead in traditional African thought are alive in another dimension of life, and they're talking to those who are the founders of this family. Of course, the Bible tells us that the dead know not anything. We don't go that way. But I want us to understand that the family in the Bible consists of parents, their children, the grandparents. That's where we start. When the Bible says obey your parents, it's not only talking to your immediate biological parents, it's talking about your grandfather, which is why in African culture, a couple did not leave their home to establish a new home until it had been groomed by the primary parents of that home into how the new life must be lived. And that's also why families or clans lived in settlements, secular settlements. The head of the family would be in the central rondavel, the igloo, right, the indlu. The Alaska people in Alaska called it igloo. I don't know who used the word first, indlu, or the Zulus or the Gunis, indlu and indlu, or those guys in North America, igloo. There are similarities here between the igloo and the indlu. My suspicion as a language teacher is that whites could have failed to pronounce the word indlu, and they created the word igloo. That's my suspicion. Let's go ahead. So family life is central in Africa. Let me tell you one reason. Because Africans were the first Christians. When the Bible was written by dark-skinned people, not written by white people. So I don't understand that the whole family fabric of the Old Testament, which depicts things like polygamy and all inheritance, pastoral culture, all these things are Afrocentric if you look at them carefully. By the way, just for interest's sake, a Russian scientist discovered that as far back as the 7th century AD, in Southern Africa, when an African man had built his kraal, he would build a cubicle in the center of the kraal where he would communicate with God. That's the concept of the sanctuary and the priest. You get the point? Sunday keepers really cut through our culture and created a disjunction between us and our forefathers, which is why 106 languages in Africa called Sabbath, Saturday, Sabado. Right. So the question of family is central, number one, in culture, central in religion. What has happened since 1652 is that the family has been decentralized from development. Ultimately, the family has disintegrated. We now have people who have even normatized certain family views, certain views about what it means to be human. There are not discourses about homosexuality, lesbianism in the African languages. I've been a language teacher for some time. We don't have a language to discuss homosexuality in Zulu, for instance. I don't know if they have it in other languages. We don't have one of the 7 sources of a language. One of the 7 sources of a language is cultural experience. Their names were borrowed from whites, and we Africanized them. We did not have a car, so it's called mode now because it's a foreign thing. The family, therefore, becomes central, number one, in bringing up children, leaving them a legacy, teaching them the culture of the nation, and introducing them to the theology of the family. Which is why Adventism teaches that a young lady should marry a young man from the church. This has nothing to do with the faith only. It has something to do with passing a heritage to your children. There's something in psychology called cognitive dissonance. If your husband drinks and you don't drink and you're a Sabbath school leader, your children won't know which way to go. Because sometimes they're sent to the bottle store to buy liquor, and each time that happens, they see you cringing. But what else can you say because you're the wife in this house? You get the point? So we need a new radical reformation in how we treat, number one, humanity. The concept of what does it mean to be human in the Adventist church? What does it mean to be a family in the Adventist church? We will ultimately get to a point where, I'm sorry to say this, because I've been thinking about this thing for a long time. We might actually have to get to a point where we rediscuss the issue of mixed marriages in the church. I'm not talking about those who come into the church mixed. Those who are Adventists, even members, who then embrace romance and matrimony from outside of the camp of the church. I know there are discussions around these issues. But the centrality of the home surrounds the question of what shall we eat, how shall we dress, what shall we sing, where will our kids receive their education? So the education department in the church should be linked to the family as well. I'm still dealing with the dynamics or the fabric of Adventism departmentally, systemically, because what we need post the COVID is a session, not an election session, a conference where we discuss the question, which way from now? Because I can tell you, the post-Adventist post-COVID Adventist church will be a totally different Adventist church. Right. What is happening now? A lot of Adventists are at pains about the fact that church is, as they know, it is not open. Here are some of the reasons. They live with non-Adventists. Some of them are women. Some ladies are being abused now. It's just unfortunate we don't hear. I hope there's nobody who's abusing an Adventist woman. But this abuse has shot up because people have lost a sense of who they really are in the scheme of things. Many people don't understand, especially the Adventists, don't understand why we should to go through this cycle of a diseased history. Secondly, we need a meeting where we're going to discuss how we are going to restructure the departments of the church so that they center around a certain departmental program. We need integration now rather than splitting. You see, the issue of splitting departments has also made the family a sufferer because people are pursuing departmental programs outside sometimes of centralizing things around coherence, keeping the church together. And you can't keep the church together when families are disparate, when families are pulling this way and that way. There's no church there. There's a community, there's a society, but no church. Number one, we have to tell our kids that they should either live as single persons until they die, or until God finds them a wife or a husband, or get married to Adventists. The idea that we tolerate these things has created a lot of loopholes within our churchmanship and weaknesses. Two, all right, here's another reason why I speak in this way. Do you know that only between 15 and 18% of Adventists globally, I'm going to repeat this one, only between 15 and 18% of people who are in the Adventist church globally grew up as Adventists in their homes. That's a small number. And the more we evangelize, the smaller this number is beginning to diminish. So those who have grown up in the church as Adventists are losing ground statistically. They might be increasing as a number, but in terms of percentages, they are reducing. I've been studying these things, reading general conference concerns around family life. Secondly, we have got pastors now for the first time in the history of the church who have grown up in the church. Those who were the first and second generation pastors had grown up in other churches. And so they did not master the full ambit of what it meant to be an Adventist. I've grown up, I'm a third generation Adventist in my family. There are things I've observed among people who are first generation Adventists, including pastors. Some of them have practices that have not matured outside of the church, but inside of the church, that tend to distend, split the coherence of Adventism within the family. So, number one, marry an Adventist or stay single and faithful. Many of us are single but unfaithful. And this leads to what we call prolonged singleness or extended singleness. We need to deal also with the issue of the fact that our cultures play a role around women. When a woman stays for too long as a single person, we start creating slides, casting reflections that might be negative towards her. Why is she not married? There could be something wrong with her. A man can stay until he's 40 and get married, but a woman who's 40 in this church may find it difficult to marry unless he gets a guy who's 50 and is divorced or has stayed single for some strange reason. So we're dealing with a complex department here. I also have this comment to make, that certain rights in the church should be left to families to decide. The challenge of the Adventist family is that it has surrendered conceptually its existence to the church. It's no longer autonomous. It obeys the church more than it obeys God sometimes, and it obeys the church more than it obeys its primary norms. I often tell people who are bereaved that after the funeral, you'll be left as a family to mourn the death of your relative when the church is gone. So I want to argue early in this discussion for the centralization of the family department. Home and family life should be the center of the department rather than the Sabbath school department, rather than the youth department. Because we move to church as families. We don't move to church as individuals primarily. We move to church as groups. So the church, the group concept in the church needs to be preserved. Western thinking, which is very secular and materialistic, says, come alone. We don't do that in African culture, which is why it is difficult for women who are married, who have married non-Adventists, to be very faithful to the church. Because sometimes they are away from the church because they are attending ceremonies and events that are attached to their husbands who are not Adventists. Post-COVID, we need a church that will speak contextually to Africanity. There's nothing wrong, there's nothing pagan about Africanity. Remember, you are not going to win most of the people who have left the church in the past 50 years or so until you address things that are fundamental to their consciousness. As I speak to you now, I might have forgotten that I'm a Zulu-speaking person with origins in northern KZN. I might have forgotten because I'm dealing with a subject that has nothing to do with my ethnicity. But when I'm alone, I remember that I'm Nkosi Ndlamamandla, some are Nkosi Dlamini, some are Nkosi Mambas. I'm not a Mchali, I'm not a Ngubeni. My consciousness is cultural. And it is within that culturality that my spirituality emerges. That's why Adventists will sit in a business meeting, agree upon certain things, even go through the same baptismal class, but practice the faith differently because of the cultural perspectives they get from their churches. So we're starting a discussion today that needs a conference or some confederation of experts and lay members to participate. We do need a new church. Let me tell you some of the reasons why we need a new church. I've been observing in the last 2 or 3 months, sermons preached by the various conference pastors in this union. I don't want to say this loudly, but some of those sermons do not speak to the coherence of families. We are promoting church more than family. We're promoting institution more than fellowship. And we're promoting more institution more than mission. The result is that we're not addressing the family. We spend 6 days in the family and 1 day in church. So it is important that on this Sabbath day, we discuss the existence of people in that part of time where they spend most of their activities. So family is central to Adventist should be central to Adventist thinking. If we call ourselves modern Jews, we should study Old Testament Jews. Their lives were centered around family. Their lives were centered around family. One of the reasons why we need to center around family, let me throw in this one. Among the Jews, one of the functions of the father was to teach, particularly the boys, a trade. Adventists tend to think that being in good and regular standing in the church is more important than being able to raise money for your family. The result is that we have a lot of unfaithful males in the church, in their homes, but who are expert leaders in the church. This contradiction does not appear in the Bible. It's paganistic. And the church needs to be able to say family first, not church first. Because this is the biblical model. The biblical model says your family is your primary church. Church is not something that happens in a large building. You go there for worship. I mean, statistically speaking, if we go to church once a week, certainly it means most of our life is lived during the 6 days of the week. So while my concerns might be around the integrity of the church, I think we need to start looking at how the family will survive the next COVID type of crisis. Because a lot of families have collapsed now, financially, professionally, occupationally, and otherwise. Many people have not met because there are rules around how many people should be in a congregation, how many people should be in a funeral, how many people should be in a classroom. We have not talked social cohesion in the Adventist church. We have talked obedience to a structure, to policies and so on, sending money to the office. There's nothing wrong with doing that, sending money to the general conference. We've been running an organization, we've not run a fellowship, we've not run a community. So we need to develop now a community-oriented churchmanship rather than a structure-oriented churchmanship. This is one of my major recommendations. Let me repeat it and allow other people to go into this discussion. I'm recommending that we develop a community centered churchmanship rather than a structure-centered churchmanship. Thank you for now.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mfundisi. So this was experience talking here tonight. So I was listening attentively and I learned a lot here. So with the last words, so I need to also emphasize, you said you need to build the community-centered church.
Yes.
So that is very important. So now, thank you so much for engaging us through this topic that was about the role of the church and family members within the family during and post-lockdown.
Yes.
So from now, I will give this opportunity because today we won't have comments and questions, but tomorrow we'll have time for comments and questions. So, but today I'll give this opportunity to the leader of the Adventist men, Freddy Rampisa, to have some comments after our guest speaker. Freddy, are you around?
Yes, I'm around, my elder.
Yes, can you come in now?
Okay. Thank you very much, my elder. And thank you very much, Pastor Thula Nkosi. And I will not give much vote of thanks. It will be done by the elder responsible for a department, Adventist and Family Life. And definitely, I also listened to what you indicated earlier, as that even in the Adventist men, remember this is a double program. It's Adventist men and Family Life. And as Adventist men, there will be no Adventist men without families.
Yes.
The mission of the Adventist men, it says to mobilize every man for wholesome development, his endeavors, family, church, and community in Christ, leading to a positive lifestyle for self and others. So as Adventist men, as Family Life, there will be no Adventist men, there will be no without Family Life. There will be no Family Life without Adventist men. And we'll be continuing the program tomorrow from 2 o'clock. We'll be joined as well by other presenters, and until Sabbath closure, we'll have time for comments tomorrow as well. I'll hand over to you, Dr. Mkulu. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Freddy, for for the words we have just uttered around this topic. Okay, so now let me take this time to give it to our elder Messina to come in to give us some closing remarks and announcements.
Okay, thanks, Babu Mchunu, Elder Mchunu, thank you. Good evening to you, dear church. I'm away.
Okay.
Ngihleli nesihlobo sakho uMadonsela. So ngelinye ilanga uyositshela istory sasemnambithi ukuthi kwakwenzakalani. It's fine. But okay, let's do this, Elder Mchunu. I see there is double interest in what Babu Nkosi was telling us.
Yes.
The challenge is tomorrow is not with us, and I fear that there might be one or two people who need to engage him here. Maybe let's allow another 5 to 10 minutes of engagement, and then we can pray after that. I'm just saying he's a highly sought after speaker, and even this evening he was not going to be with us. He had another engagement, but he had to be with us. So maybe with your permission, Babu Nkosi, another 5 to 10 minutes, let the church and members engage you. But from our side, we are excited, we are happy, you have challenged us. We're actually talking and saying we cannot go back the same way we went out before the COVID broke out. We cannot go back to church the same way we came out. Something has got to change. Something has to be redefined. We have to find a new church. We have to find a new soul to carry us forward. And we need to, the message is still the same, but how we package it and carry it forward, we might need to look at the utensils we are using and recondition some of them. So thank you for that challenge. And we wish you well in your ministry, and those that you'll be ministering to, let them also benefit like we have benefited. For many years, you have built many of us, and you continue to be an inspiration. So thank you so much. And I think I speak on behalf of the whole church when I say thank you for making the time. And we will see you when we see you, when God allows us to meet in person. We know once a year you like to make a turn at our church. Come back again after COVID. Elder Mchunu, thanks for driving the program. Thank you for availing yourself as well this evening to help the church move forward. With your guidance, guide the discussion maybe another 5 to 10 minutes, then wrap it up from your side. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Elder. Thank you. I've also been made aware that Pastor Nkosi has not yet finished, but he was giving us a break. So now, thank you, Elder, for giving us this time for comments and questions. But I think Pastor Nkosi must continue for another 10 minutes, then we have comments and questions.
Could I get comments now, questions, and then I speak later?
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. Dear saints, we are giving you this time for questions and comments on part 1 before Pastor Nkosi continues. So let me check here. Okay. So there's a comment here. Which was a question. Is continuing tomorrow. Nkosi is not with us tomorrow. Okay. These are just comments. Can we have comments, Bazalwane, or questions before we continue? We can either raise a hand here or just speak. Okay, any comment or question? So far, I haven't seen any hand being raised here. Then we'll continue then. Maybe
Alright.
questions will come after.
There is a hand, Elder.
Pardon?
There is a hand.
Oh, there's a hand. Okay, let me
My
see. Oh, okay. Okay, sorry. Okay, Mamilo Center. Okay. Let me give you the time to speak.
Thank you, Elder. I greet everyone in the name of the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Yes, I want to for the intro. That was beautiful. I have a question from this. I heard you say that in the African society, a new couple or a newlyweds would stay with their parents before they leave for grooming.
Yeah.
Now, my question is, when the Bible records and says, a man shall leave his mother and cling to the wife, isn't it that contradicting with the Bible? How we as African have taken up the tradition of doing that?
Fine. I was expecting that type of question. Remember that African society was family-centered, just as biblical Old Testament and New Testament churches were. The family in Africa is the center of industry, the center of education, center of cultural transmission, the center of ceremonies and so on. So is the family in the Bible. But when Jesus comes, he then says, look, I've come to create separation. He was not saying is announcing dissension in the church. He was merely saying, I now call for no longer communal commitment to me, but individual surrender of life. That was a new dimension if you find in the New Testament. And it accommodates some of us who are not historically Jews, who may be Africans, but not necessarily Jews. Because while Jews were dark-skinned people, not all dark-skinned people are Jews, all right? Now, what I suggest we should do is to restudy where we come from. Each church should be able to say, what is the model that will best serve us and best witness for Jesus Christ? You see, our church is full of divorcees, and some of them came into the church through efforts, others divorced while they were in the church. And we have a church, frankly speaking, that is bleeding. And a lot of the blood has coagulated, it's dry. And that's why it is causing a lot of pain among us. And within that milieu of confusion, compromises take place. What should we do with the current church structure, which is sociologically inclined rather than biblically inclined? I think each church should be able to define where it wants to go in terms of its locale and so on. But pastors as leaders need to give us space to rebirth the Black or the African church with sound norms from our past and biblical principles, so that we don't fracture good things in African culture with a gospel that we think superintends all cultures. Because by so doing, we may fail to attract other people into the faith. I don't have final answers now. I can only provide recommendations. And I'm glad we're beginning a journey to create a new church and a new family-centered church in the future. Who knows if our new model might make these fathers who drink and so on follow their wives to church and their kids as well. Because for now, until now, the Black Adventist Church is just a community of disparate individuals. We have not become a real family. I want to stop there for now.
Okay. Thank you, Fundesi. I hope the question has been answered. Yes. So for now, I'm not seeing any hand being raised here for questions and comments. We have comments, Basalwane, before Mfundisi Qhubeke? If not, then we'll allow the pastor to continue.
All right, fine. I would like to end or continue this discussion by talking about the 5 functions of a Jewish father. Number 1, he had to teach his 3 children the language of the Jews. A Jewish father had to teach his children the language of the Jews. Secondly, by the way, language is very basic in human development, very foundational. One of the reasons why blacks have failed in schools is that they've not developed sufficient linguistic capacity to master the concepts in particular disciplines at school, particularly in universities. It is possible in South Africa to meet a graduate who cannot speak proper English. So you find that there's a disjunction between his qualification and his linguistic competency. The two should be going together. Language is very important. You go to Ellen White, read Education, I think it's page 254 or 255, the left-hand page. The first paragraph says, I'm quoting a verbatim, more important than the knowledge of foreign languages, living or dead, is the ability to read and write one's mother tongue with ease and accuracy. I'm quoting it exactly. Some of our kids have gone to modesty schools, have come back to church and be acted as though speaking Zulu, speaking Swati or Xhosa or Sotho is an infra-dig activity. The result is that there are people now in our churches who can no longer preach in their African vernaculars. It's disgraceful to me. Because I'm a language patriot. I'm a language patriot. Let's speak their English, but please, let's know our home languages. It's very important. Other nations will despise us as long as we have no language integrity. So the question of language must be discussed in a family. Of course, one might be able to say, what if I marry a Shona and a Mezuru and so on? All those things would have to come into the discussion. Secondly, we need to be able to tell our children where we come from. We have a nation today of young people, generation of young people who don't care where their parents came from. You know, in the Gauteng area, this is very common. You ask a child, where did you go? I don't know. I don't even care. When I was born in Jabavu, Soweto, I hear that they were in Zululand or in Botswana or whatever. You know, they just throw the hands away and you begin to discover. You know, there's an American historian, Carl Sandburg, who says in one of his books, and I'm quoting it verbatim, he says, for we know that when a nation goes down and never comes back, when a people forget who they are, they've lost sight of where they came from. They have no future worth preserving and fighting for. This is the condition of many black people in urban areas in South Africa today, who now speak things like Stamto and all these other things. The third thing is that we need a refocused, a church that refocuses on family life. I'm giving a particular point here, slightly different from the one I made earlier. We need to be concerned about family more than membership. You see, this idea of being worried about membership is is part of Western spirituality, because we're separating the member from the group. We need to be able to say, Baba, why is your family not here? Mama, where is your husband? We need to be sure that that we no longer see in church is still part of this family. Visitations are very important. So we need to start re-engaging people on family life. Of course, with the type of life we live now, where people have come from all over the continent, some people might not know where family is and so on. But they need to be then adopted or engaged in a re-familialization. I'm creating a word here. We need to reincorporate them into a new family model. Because I can tell you now, the question, where is thy flock, which I gave you, is going to be very serious at the end of time. The other thing is, we can't have families without industries. One of the things that have fractured families, particularly black families, is that families don't have the wherewithal. It is not fine for a man not to work and think he has a family. For a woman to support a male, number one, it's not African. Number two, it's not Christian. Number three, it has nothing to do, it is not a modern way of living. We know that in family we have to cooperate with one another in terms of how we shall sustain the economy of the home. But I've always said when I do premarital counseling, do both of you work? If one of them works, it should be the male. If one of them does not work, it should be the female. I'll tell you why. I don't subscribe to the view that the male is a provider because it's unbiblical. It's not even un-African. It's un-African. In Africa, everybody worked. There was no such thing as the male is a provider. This concept of a male providing comes from how men were destroyed by colonization. You take them, you remove them from Zululand, from the Eastern Cape, you bring them to Johannesburg so that you can give them money, and you don't care what happens out there in the countryside. It's a model of thought around men that is very colonial. It is not biblical and it's not African. There is no provider in African culture. Both men and women work. Our fields were plowed by both members of the sexes, right? The last thing is we need to start thinking about legacy creation in families now. I've studied the history of music. I studied at college and so on. Many of the music instruments we use that come from the West have got particular names because in the Western societies there were guilds. These guilds were related to families, family names, and so on. And that's why you find some of these musical instruments with particular names. Yahama, pianos have got their own particular names because these were house industries where people perfected ways of generating income. We don't have that. I accept the fact that we're destroyed by colonization, but I think we have space now, post-1994, to go back and recover some of this lost ground. Thank you. Somebody is saying, comment, our church is very embedded in structure. All right. It is embedded in structure because, it is embedded in structure. By the way, policies in this church are not a doctrine. They change from time to time. The problem lies in the fact that the church is generally the lowest part of the structure, and all the others tend to sit over it and expect the church, and yet it should be the church above all the structures. We're the ones who create the district, we're the ones who create the conference, we're the ones who create the union, we're the ones who create the division, we're the ones who create the general conference. It is not these structures that create us. That's one thing you need to know. We need to stop this top-down process of thinking. The church is where the member is and not where the leader is. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mfundisi. Okay. So this was part 2 of the discussion. If I can summarize a few points. So the opening remarks, Pastor Nkosi said, this crisis, this COVID-19, is here preparing us for the worst crisis to come as a church. And then number 2, we said post-COVID-19 will be totally different church, okay, in various aspects of life. So we also need to understand that when we go to church, we move to church as a family. So therefore the focus should be on families. So therefore we need to address issues that have to do with families. So Pastor Nkosi also mentioned that it is important to deal with language issues, especially the mother tongue as a language for our children. So I also noted that. And therefore we need to pass the family heritage to our children. We need to leave legacy to our children. So those are the point I marked here.
Could I make one last point for it?
Yes.
Could I make? Yeah, I know this one is going to sound very radical. Very radical. The epistemology of the Adventist Church outside of the Bible has tarnished the African ethos. we need to do something about the art that is in Adventist literature. Jews were not Europeans. We brought up our kids to think that the Adventist church is a Eurocentric church with Eurocentric art. European art moved into the church in the middle of the Dark Ages. There was all pictures of Jesus and of the disciples before that period were dark. The Jewish scholar Josephus, who was captured during the AD 70 destruction of Jerusalem, was then forced by the Romans to write a history of the Jews. He states it very clear when he discusses the personality of Jesus. He says Jesus was a tall, well-built man with a dark hue. He makes it clear. We must stop this idea of pussyfooting the complexion of the Jews now. We don't have time now to be begging whites who have deceived us for centuries. I'm being honest with you. Our kids, let me tell you something. When our children were still young, my wife and I covered their Sabbath school lessons with their pictures. So that they don't keep seeing European kids here. Pictures of Jesus walking in the lawns in heaven, cascading rivers and so on. All those pictures are false. This is one of the and I can tell you now, as long as we maintain this Eurocentric pictorialization of biblical characters, our church has no right to grow in Africa. Well, it is bit literature, Adventist literature, deliberately in a text one day, started to sit at the back. It is bit, some of it had these pictures of white Jesus. 3 men said, telling a young man, don't bring those things here. We're not Europeans here. We're Africans. You get the point? Yeah. I know we are going to impact the General Conference heavily on this one. I've written heavily on this thing. I'm writing a document. I'm sending it to the president of the General Conference to argue this very question of the arts, because we're finding it difficult to witness in Africa as long as we present people with Jesus who is not related to African people. The Hebrew language, in which the Testament was written, is an Afro-Asian language. It is not English at all. That's why people who know Swahili find it easy to study Hebrew. Greek was used after Jews had been Hellenized during the intertestamental period. That's why, because many Jews had lost contact with their primary language. So Greek was used. And the Greek that you find in the New Testament is not your classical Greek. It is Greek of the common man. We call it Koine Greek. We could call it slang, basically. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this. So this presentation is so informative. So I'm noting the hands here. Also, we are noting the comments from Fundo Tole. So Fundo was summarizing, putting it in a summary, what Fundo has just said. Thank you so much, Fundo. We are noting this comment. And we have a hand being raised here from Huawei P30 Lite. Can I give you the time to comment or ask question?
Ngiyabonga Ntalumkhulu. Ubaba Maphanga lo khulumayo.
Oh yes, Papa.
Yes. Mfundisi Nkosi ngiyathemba uyaphila nawe.
Yaphila sir.
Yes. Mangiqale ngithi Mfundisi, thank you. Especially, I'm more interested in the second part of what you said. Sikhula in this church. Actually, our kids are more fortunate manje because isingisi is just flowing.
Yes.
From esikolweni nathi sifika la ekhaya si interacta with them. Ngaso I think somehow uNkulunkulu ebazi ukuthi tonight sokhuluma ngale topic. We're just telling my daughter now, my 6-year daughter, ukuthi no more English endlini, because masithi simzama ngeSiswati nangeSixhosa, she goes like, I don't understand what you're saying.
But yeah.
So I mean ngiyayibona ukuthi iyalimaza ba umntwana uzothi mayekhula kuzoba iproblem manje abanye ukuthi hayibo lengane ikhule eAmerica iningasazi isingisi ingayazi ilanguage yasekhaya.
Yes,
but bona bakhula kanjani, thina sikhula kule nkonzo yama Adventist. If you don't know English kule nkonzo awufunda. Sikhula kanjalo. If awuyazi English awufundanga. As a result, if abakhule kule generation yethu, remember, we'll even talk kuthiwa ukhuluma ama-kipirosh. Sikhulume nje sizama ukukhuluma lesingisi that we don't understand because we didn't get that opportunity yokuya in this upmarket school. Sikhulela elokishini. But when you come to the church, which was good then, ukuthi enkonzweni ama-Sabbath school sasibhalelwa amaphepha in English ukuthi Sabbath school yakho must be like this. Uthola ukuthi like mina as a Swati, you could even hear the accent ukuthi lo umSwati lo, isingisa lo esomZulu, isingisa lo esomshangane, so forth and so forth, which is something esikhule ngayo nathi sesiyayithatha sesifake ebantwaneni bethu. Fortunate enough abantwana bafika vele sesibafunela nathi izikolo whereby mele bafunde isingisi. Fundisi, for us to break indaba ye Africanism in the Adventist church. I'm not going to talk about other churches because I'm going to talk about Adventism. It is fairly in our minds in such a way that even our own culture or a culture yomuntu as I recognize. I'll give an example. Some few years ago, we were in Kangala, Heritage Day. We were in Kangala. People must dress in their culture, right? I adorned my Swati culture, and off I went to Ekangala. When I went to Ekangala, I went to Ekangala as umuntu who's going to chorister Ekangala. When I got to Ekangala, Mfundisi, a shock to my life that I could not chorister because of the attire I was wearing. Kwalandwa umzalwane ofake ibhlukwe, i-shirt nebhantshi. Kwathiwa mawuya kabambe le nkonzo yobuchorister because the chorister that was chosen, he's wearing his traditional attire, and I don't know for some reason or what, I could not do that. Okay, I didn't have a problem, but it bothered me. My African people, I'm Africans, I'm wearing Swati, and there's nothing offensive about what I'm wearing, but I'm not fit enough to stand ebandleni to usher, to do that service. So it said to me a lot. I am saying to you, as long as Africans see believer which church manual that gives inkonzo guidance, and I want to believe all that kuvela America from the GC, we're still far. Sisasekude to ukuthi thina siz accept. In other words, ama culture wethu njengoba mina ngumswati from Nelspruit, ngisase inferior komunye umuntu osafuna uku-adopta what is the General Conference is putting us. We've been having a debate yamatai and all that, which is a topic of another day. But what I'm saying is mina ngeyami ingqondo, as long as sisasebenzisa le language kwakhona in our churches. I know ukuthi enkonzweni yethu we've got different people who are coming. We've got people who are from other countries who might not understand isiZulu or isiSwati. The only language they could understand is English. Now the question is, how far do we go kubantu abanjalo so that bakwazi nabo to feel welcome in our church? If in Konzo to city we are family based, we've got a lot of families who are coming kwezinye izindawo. I was saying now, mabafika umuntu ufika neSwahili, understand the Swahili. And it will take me long. Umshumeli uzoshumela ngeSwahili, I may not understand, so uyalahle ibandla lizolahleka. But now Mfundisi, where do we meet each other in that? Because now we are an African country, people are coming in, I don't expect umuntu wase Congo makafika la South Africa I understand the isiSwati san or isiZulu. Obviously we have to communicate in English because sifuna nabuthi ekugcineni sibawine labantu laba bafilishe comfortable. I came to Mamelodi Central. Abazalwane, they were comfortable. Sihlale sikhala sithi we go to Africans, siye enkonzweni ngemistake. Uthola ukuthi kuleyo nkonzo leyo there's Africans speaking people. Aba compromise. They continue their Africans, and you feel unwelcomed in that church. Kwamanye ama-Africans church baze bathi hayi mzalwane, awuthi sikuphelezele kwi-English church so that uzoba comfortable. So to me, kusase problem le ukuthi how do we break those barriers? Because we can't have say I mean into yama language yenzeka ngesifundo phela. We've got this ngama classes kuma lesson. Sine Zulu class, kune English class, like in different languages. Abanye bafite kwi-English because alikho class labo that can cater for them, especially those who are from Zimbabwe and other countries. But mangime lapho kwamanje mfundisi, but my challenge is how do we close that gap so that wonke umuntu enkonzweni, as well about families, everybody is able to say, we understand, they spoke in my language. As I said, this common language that engasilidela somewhere else. Thank you.
Fine. Can I say something, Babunkun?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. There is a fault that has taken place in Adventist churchmanship. We have overstressed the importance of the General Conference, the division, the union, and the conference. Adventist churchmanship begins from the church. It does not begin from the GC. This is a colonial model, and it suppresses the resources of the church. That is why the conference has more money than the church. It's wrong. It's wrong. The church should have, because it is at the front face of mission. The church should be more resourced than the office, because it is at the front face of the. I mean, how many churches are in the conference? How many people are in the conference? Fewer than those in any single congregation. So you need to start recultivating a congregationally driven churchmanship. That's why our kids go mad when they go to camps and display bad behavior, because there has been no cultural coherence from their homes. What I suggest should happen is that the next time we go to sessions, let's talk about us and not talk about other people. Let's talk about where we come from, who we are, and how we're going to feature. I mean, to me, it is very anomalous that whites can live inside the church and experience their culturality, and blacks can live in the church and be aliens to who they are. It's not right at all. It's not right at all. Let me give you a strange example, an interesting example. You talked about ties and so on. Do you know the tie comes from the Nordic countries, the very cold countries next to the Arctic Ocean? Your Sweden, the Scandinavian countries, those three countries, Finland, Sweden, and Norway. That's where the tie comes from. It was a string tied by men around the neck to prevent air from getting into the chest. That's where the tie came from. This idea of forcing people to wear ties in church is totally wrong. There are no ties in the Bible in the first place. No ties. There are no ties in the Bible. The Jews never wore ties. How would you feel if I dressed like Jesus in church? Would you expel me? Jesus was a Jew. He wore a robe. Look at your African karos, ipeshu. That thing is a skirt, except that it has pleats. Combine it, it's a skirt. If you can combine all those strands in a ipeshu, that's a skirt. So where do trousers come from? You get the point? So what I want to recommend is that each church should sit down and design its own local cultural perspectives. And you need to grow in these things. You can't force the church to be uniform all the time. The same happens in the area of music. Because I've studied music at college, I also feel that we need to doctor our music and start thinking and singing the way Africans have been singing. I'm not saying it is wrong to sing European songs. There's nothing wrong there. But please don't undermine African languages. in our churchmanship. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mfundisi, for that response to Bob Mapanga's question about language issues and culture. So, yeah, that was a very important point, Bob Mapanga, you raised, especially the one about languages. You see, even at schools, so the government says from grade 1, 2, 3, so the emphasis should be on African languages. So before a learner switches over to another language, so the emphasis should position African languages, our mother tongue language. Our children should learn their mother tongue languages. That's important. So that was a very important point you raised, Mapanga. Thank you so much for that one. So as a church, we need to sit down and think about how we want to do our thing as we worship God. So we need to sit down and rethink all these things that pertains to cultures and languages. So, Bazalwane, any further questions, further discussions? Okay, Elder Zansi, I'm seeing a hand here. Can you come in, please?
Bengithi mina Macingwane.
Yes.
Bengithi mina mdala Macingwane. Kunjani sifake balance.
Yes.
Sifake balance kulento esithetha ngayo. I don't know, I was not there nxa uMaphanga bemstopa enkangala for ukuhlabelelisa. Kodwa if begqoke iswati, I'm sure inyama beyivele kakhulu.
Yeah.
Ngiyacabanga nje ithanga, for example, uyawuthi shaya ekhorista lapha i-congregation ibukene nethanga likaMaphanga loko livele ithanga, athi umejika kanje kuvela umqolo, athi methu uyagoba ukhomba ingoma kuvela isifuba. If sisusa uMaphanga sifaka umama naye agqoka iswati noma isiZulu, kuvela namabele nokunye. Kunjani sibalance sithi mhlawumbe this western thing introduce i-element ye-covering, ngoba i-covering enkonzweni iyafuneka. It may be western, ukugquma uvale singaboni inyama kakhulu. This is why siba ne-problem ngeyikhethe zeyichebhezane nokunye, because a lot of flesh comes out. Now, it's wrong when it's showing the thigh, but even if it's gonna show the stomach and the back and the chest, mhlambe apha esifubeni uMaphanga is very hairy. Sibona uboya bukaMaphanga lapha esifubeni kanje. Bengithi mina, isn't there a way of balancing this thing so that kube nama activities that will entertain the expression of culture? Mhlambe esidasa besine cultural night and other things. Kodwa the worship service itself, so that abantu bangaluzi attention, we allow covering as much as possible. For example, I have heard abantu abafana nabo babumlambo basema Melody West saying that swalala manje babumlambo, saying that even the pins you put on your jacket, I know master guides like putting their pins, and other people have got pins from the training here, Adventist men, and Abefundisi have got many pins now that you find on people's jackets. Utubabumlambo, you don't want, as we are preaching, people are busy looking at the pin and trying to understand or analyze the pin and lose out on the message. So zikhona izinto esingazenza njengabantu, but they take their attention away from the essence of worship. Isn't there a balancing act ekufanele siyenze? A part of me, Babu Nkosi, a part of me that is extreme says kunjani sivumele le generation ife yonke ingcwatshwe bese ke kuvuka enye generation. With young people last afternoon, abama young adults were very creative. They were asking us, for example, ukuthi who said inkonzo must start at 11 a.m. Where does that come from? Njengoba now you are telling us about the tie. Kunjani ngoba le generation le seyimoshakele and yesu yabuya siyeke ife. bese ke kuvuke enye ke iqala izinto ezintsha ezi ukuya phambili, because I do see a lot of conflict that's going to happen if you're trying to mix these two. That's just my thinking, man ngifuna ukuba extreme, but I just wanted him to comment on the part of balancing, covering during a worship service. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elder Zansi. That was a very important comment. So Pastor Nkosi will come in also to respond on it. Balancing.
Maqingwane, I think Zansi has a legitimate concern.
Yes.
As a point of beginning, one of the challenges we have in the Black Church is that we have over-prescribed without consultation. We don't discourse, we merely prescribe, and it causes a problem. So we need sessions now to recreate what we understood as Adventism 50 years, 60 years, 100 years ago. What did we actually inherit? Do we still need the tie? Do we need the jacket? Do we need the English? Do we need these songs we're singing, some of which were pagan? I'm telling you the truth. I mean, because I've done music, I'm taking a lot of some of these things into perspective now. But I will not go into the music part. Here is the point, Babu Zansi and others. Each church should have a discussion with businessmen. Stop hankering for uniformity. You'll never win, because you're going to do harmony. You're going to create a problem where you find urban churches behaving in a particular way, rural churches behaving in another way, black churches behaving this way, white churches behaving in another way. The Afrikaners are saying we don't like what the English are doing and so on. Look for a mean. The mean says dress decently in church, dress moderately. The Bible does not say wear a tie. There's no such thing. But in our churches, you can't climb the pulpit if you don't have a tie. That's why we have the Maponga saga in Orlando West. Because there are those who are tie, who cannot be saved if they don't see a tie. But when they show us pictures of Jesus, they don't discuss the absence of the tie. It's a strange thing to me. So this happens all the time when a culture is colonized by a foreign culture. Study histories all over. There are tensions. But I think the stage at which we are now as a Black church indicates that we are ready to interrogate our heritage, so that ultimately we put our stamp on that which is principle-based and not fashion-based. So I think Uzansi has raised a valid point. There needs to be discourses rather than castigations. It is wrong for adults to treat youth that way. And you don't get, sometimes I've seen deaconesses walking to the front, scolding young people, and we don't do that. Remember, the generation that is growing now has been grown up in a culture that talks human rights and so on. And the church, let me tell you, has become a disposable organization. People don't care whether they do church or not. So don't think that you are doing us a favor by fighting us in the church. I can move to Mamelodi East, go to Spapapani and so on. And if you move from one congregation to another, you also discover that there are variations in the cultural perspectives, some of the depending on the majority of the people. Last year I spoke in a largely Zimbabwean member church. I did not know. One woman stood up and said, "Of course, do you know that Tina Mandebele was Zimbabwe? We don't have cultural dress. So that's why we dress like this during the week and during the." I was surprised. I'd never known that. At the point. So there needs to be continual discovery, discussion. I want to recommend something. Go to Google, all of you. Punch Church of Refuge Church. Church of Refuge. It's a North American division document. It could be about 35 pages. It came out of research they did among their young people. They discovered that many of our young people were leaving the church. In the North American division, 40 to 50% of all youth above 24 are not in the church, because they regard the church as an obsolete, old-fashioned organization. The Western nations in our church are struggling with keeping youth in the church. Tina, we can still scold our kids and so on, but we are moving to a point where we're going to have youth churches now in South Africa. because the youth feel distanced from the old culture of thought in the church. All I'm promoting is engage in a discourse. Don't lay policy that has not been discussed.
Thank you so much, Mfundisi, for your response. I will also say, in the midst of all cultures and traditions, so we need to have a principle.
Yes.
With regard to dress, because a principle will never change. So, as you've just said, that we need to dress decently and in modesty. So that's very important. So a principle will help us. Then we have another hand here from Mamelodi Central. I'm not sure who's this one. Can you come in, please?
Thank you, Mtala Ngiyabonga. Thank you, Mfundisi, for a wonderful presentation.
Oh, yes.
Thank you, Mtala. You know, we are living in difficult times where Uglokunja, our Christianity came more with colonization. So for us to be Christians, for us to be regarded as Christians, came in a package that first you must be seen wearing a suit and a tie. Further, it has been indicated that when it comes to modesty, in Africanism, modesty is something different, something else. But in Christianity, modesty has more to do with the way you dress in a Western culture. Further, sometimes even we are to blame as Christians because we are more concerned about being Africans only when we go to church on a Sabbath. But on any other day, we prefer to be seen wearing nice suits. When we go to our corporate environment, to our workplaces, we don't want to be seen wearing our African attire. Instead, we'll prefer to be seen wearing those suits and a tie. So our Africanism has lost its meaning. It has starting to come now with this revolution, which is positive because it's an indication that few years to come, our generation, our next generations will be the one who will be able to change the context of Christianity. That it is not only aligned as inculcated in our minds as it has been instilled in our upbringing with the dressing code, with the attire that we wear.
Thank you so much, Elder Zondi, for the comment.
Could I make a last statement, Babu?
Yes, Mfundisi.
I want to re-emphasize what I said earlier. Some of these things will depend on consensus agreements. They will not be based on particular perspectives. But in all discourses, agreement should be around modesty, worshipfulness, decency, and appropriateness. I don't take a raincoat into a church when there's no rain. Sit inside a raincoat just because it covers all my body. In as much as I will not take a bikini to church, I'll take it to the sea or a swimming pool. So it's a dicey thing, a very dicey thing. Are you aware of the fact that the Adventists who go to church on Sunday? I wonder if some of you are aware. This is what happened. When geographers created the international dateline, some of the configurations fell on islands or split certain island conglomerates, archipelagos. We call an archipelago is a set of islands. So the line curved this way and that way, and some of the islands fell on a Saturday, others fell on a Sunday. Adventists who had declared, who were now told that you are on Sunday, refused to embrace a change in worship. They said we're Adventists, even though we go to church on Sunday. Because they were rejecting the configuration of the international date line. So we need to be very circumspect when we deal with issues of culture. Culture, by the way, also changes. Culture also changes. So sit around the principles of the Bible, read Ellen White. We need a church now that reads and stop. We need to do more reading than listening. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this.
By the way, those were my last comments.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much for this. And Pastor Rani, you all agree with me that in this presentation, we are all learning a lot as well. We are learning here from Thula Nkosi. Now I'm seeing no hands now, except Elder Zans. I'm not sure if it's an old hand or it's another new question.
No, sorry, it's an old hand, Mdala, sorry.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Sorry.
I think now we are coming to the close of our session. Thank you, Thula Nkosi, for your time. That's for scheduling or for allowing us to have you on this day to present on this serious and sensitive topic about the role of the church, family, and family members during and post COVID-19. So we benefited a lot from the discussion. All the contributions, questions and comments, and the discussion lively. So now we are going to have someone pray for us. Mama Swele Moja, can you lead us in prayer as we are closing? Mama Swele.
And the day I was unmuting, sorry.
Okay. Yes.
Jehovah, Sabbath, Lord Filenona, Lawadi Horatza Halala Mudimu Zerkenimozona. All the blessings that you bestow upon us. We thank you for this informative discussion, where we've learned so much. May it fall on fertile ground. We must sit and think about it and incorporate it in our lives. We pray for all the programs tomorrow, because this is the beginning. Jehovah bless our pastor, or saying a special message. Family, but above all, may you grow us in wisdom. We understand the discussion and adjust as well as we grow and develop spiritually. This is my humble prayer that I offer in the name of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, who lives now and forevermore. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Mama Swele, for the word of prayer. Thank you, Mfundisi Nkosi, for your time. We are continuing tomorrow. So this weekend is being shared by two departments: Family Life Ministries and Andres Men. So we are continuing tomorrow with other guest speakers. So thank you, elders, for allowing us the extension of the time to continue with this discussion. It was we benefited a lot from it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good night. Let's meet tomorrow.
Someday we'll be going home with a loved ones to share exceeding joy and peace will